Force will be with you, always.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Star Wars Lads Weekly Special. Before I begin my second part of the grading the Star Wars eras under Disney, I need to make a slight correction to my first part. I gave the prequel era a B+ when I actually meant
The Force will be with you, always.
now. Let's begin the second part, beginning with
The Force will be with you, always.
we don't have Star Wars without the original trilogy, and our idea of world building in the galaxy was shaped here through the extended universe. Though much of it is fun and groundbreaking, such as Shadows of the Empire, these same materials are ultimately messy additions to the Legends era that truly was more developed during its New Republic timeline. The canon reset has done some excellent storytelling with original cast of characters, but it has had its ups and downs. What it has done that Legends never had a chance to do was create a film in that era, in Rogue One. I know to some that this is cheating and should be more connected to the Dark Times era before, but its direct and immediate relevancy to A New Hope made me add it here. It's got a good story, though it is hard to connect with often paper-thin characters like Jyn and Cassian, but it more than makes up for it by being a true war film and being a top 2 Star Wars film in terms of scope and visuals. The magnificent fan service of Vader, Tarkin, Leia, and red and gold leaders cannot be understated, and A New Hope is forever a better film because of Rogue One. As much as many of us love Kyle Katarn, it's hard to argue it's better than seeing that Darth Vader hallway sequence in theaters. Our original cast of characters get some extensive coverage with the comic book lines especially. From episodes 4 to 5, the biggest reads are the Star Wars 2015 line started by Jason Aaron and the Kieran Gillen Darth Vader line. The Darth Vader line is a standout throughout, with a sharp story of change and reveals that brings Vader into the larger figure that he is in The Empire Strikes Back quite clearly. Though it struggles through La Roca's art at times, it is still one of the must-have canon comic book series out there. The Jason Aaron line nails the main trio quite well and has some amazing stories of the rebellion's growth, Luke's Jedi journey, and Han and Leia's burgeoning romance. But it begins to struggle from the last flight of the Harbinger arc onwards. Kieran Gillen picks up the series next after his successful Vader run and does a great job with all of his arcs through a focus on story serialization. All of his arcs feature impressive developments for the Big Three in the Rebellion, bringing them much closer to the versions of the characters and the galactic situation in The Empire Strikes Back. The series is finished by Greg Pak, but much of the impressive work completed by Gillen is upended by this final set of stories. Ultimately, while a quick read, this final arc doesn't set up much for the characters, and a final fight with Darth Vader is so underwhelming that I'm still bothered by it. Empire Ascendant serves as a one-shot that ties together all the comic series together and gets us to Hoth, but it's still not amazing. In the same time period, we have one other ongoing comic series, Dr. Aphra. After starring as a quasi-Indiana Jones with no moral compass in the Gillen Darth Vader line, Aphra's own series lets her continue her time with numerous bounty hunters and monsters, all of whom she backstabs and somehow bests. She does grow into quite a beloved character, as she is often on the hunt for items from Lost Force cultures and manages to overcome some childhood trauma and connect with her father, Corin Aphra, fall in love with the crazy Imperial turned rebel Magna Tolvan, and form a sisterly bond with the street orphan Vlada Clamp, all of whom she disconnects from by the end to keep them safe and away from her. The assassin droids 000 and BT-1 become somewhat redundant and annoying over the course of the series, but characters like Dr. Evazan and Black Chrysanthemum elevate the series through every arc. This era is so comic book dominated that there's only officially 3 adult novels set after New Hope and before Return of the Jedi: Heir to the Jedi, Battlefront Twilight Company, and Battlefront 2, Inferno Squadron. There are a few small junior novels littered into the time period, but overall, there's very little lengthy reads in this part of the era. There are still some gems in the comics outside of the main series, such as the extremely underrated Lando miniseries by Charles Soule, if you can't commit for a long series. After the galaxy-altering events of The Empire Strikes Back, every mainline comic series was rebooted, and new series have appeared as well. Target Vader served as Baylor Valance's reintroduction to canon after being a unique addition in the 70s Star Wars comics, and the character has gone on to headline the ongoing Bounty Hunter series until very recently. It's got some fun art, character banter, and action, but it truly is the Fast and Furious of the comics, and struggles to coherently display the changing underworld of that era. The Dr. Aphra reboot has been very up and down, as stripping her away from her pseudo family has resulted in a weaker supporting ensemble, but the reintroduction of the Tag family from the 70s Star Wars comics has brought some of the swashbuckling and villainous energy of the first Doctor Afro series back. The two main series, Greg Pak's Darth Vader and Charles Soule's Star Wars, started off with amazing arcs, but only Star Wars has returned to that initial form in recent months, with Vader showing some signs of life pretty recently. The post Empire Strikes Back comics have had many highs and lows due in part to the emphasis on crossover events, specifically War of the Bounty Hunters. Bringing back Kira and Crimson Dawn to this era opens a wellspring for interconnected storytelling, and the miniseries itself is a great read, but the mainline series issues connected to the event often were recaps or alternative POVs. Some, like the Afra and Bounty Hunter series, had very little reason to even be involved in the story, and their issues highlight those struggles. War of the Bounty Hunters has made the comics once again essential parts of the canon for the first time in years, but its execution and COVID-related delays made the event overtly long and more burdensome than exciting at times. Charles Soule is following up this event with two more miniseries titled Crimson Reign and Hidden Empire. Crimson Reign has focused solely on characters recruited by Crimson Dawn, making it a miniseries of disconnected POVs of characters like the Archivist and the Knights of Ren, but it seems mostly set up for a Hidden Empire and warns that the Kira story and reasons for returning so prominently to the galaxy's views ends with tragedy. This era of Disney Star Wars is extremely filled out, but a focus on comic book storytelling makes the stories of this era visually stimulating, but not always as impactful as intended. This leads me to giving this era a.
The Force will be with you. Always.
This next era is where some of the biggest Disney Star Wars canon materials have been created, and I really believe it has the potential to outclass the Legends era.
The Force will be with you. Always.
The New Republic era has been one of the most worked on eras since Disney reset the Star Wars canon. For many, this is the era of Star Wars storytelling that kept the demand for Star Wars alive between the original trilogy's end and the prequel trilogy's beginning. Excellent books from this era, like the Heir to the Empire trilogy, were mixed with horrible books like Darksaber and the Crystal Star, but Star Wars is not here today without those Bantam Star Wars era books. Disney's sequel trilogy ensures that this era has a specific endpoint, which Legends arguably never had, as the original trilogy's main heroes maintained their stranglehold on all forms of storytelling until the underrated Star Wars Legacy comics set over 125 years after Return of the Jedi. Attempts at moving the galaxy story to new directions with future generations, such as the New Jedi Order initiative, failed to have the intended effect. To some degree, Disney has understood that this era still needs to elevate the original trilogy heroes while also making room for new and unique stories. It has had some amazing successes, but only particularly in the live action shows. The comics of this era have mostly been average stories and have provided some interesting POVs and lore at best. Shattered Empire picks up after the events of Return of the Jedi and showcases the Big Three with Shara Bey, Poe Dameron's mother, but the miniseries is best known for introducing how Palpatine ensured that the Empire would crumble in the event of his death. The Rise of Kylo Ren, another Charles Soule miniseries, showcases the fall of Ben Solo at the very end of this era. As wonderful as it is also too big of a story to have just been showcased in 4 issues. Truly, it is only the Poe Dameron series, which is set just months before The Force Awakens, that is the highlight of the comics from this era. Dameron is explored in great detail here, with unique Imperial characters like Agent Terex working with the First Order and engaging in Cold War escalation with the fun ragtag Black Squadron. It's a delightful and easy series to read, and it even gives a bit of a taste for what happens to Poe after his presumed death on Jakku and up to just before The Last Jedi. The books of this period are only somewhat better, as they are more notable for their lore than anything else. The Aftermath trilogy, by Chuck Wendig, was marketed almost as a canon Heir to the Empire trilogy replacement, but it was far from it. The focus is on a ragtag crew in the early days of the New Republic, who are meant to capture and eliminate Imperial fugitives. While there are bigger events like the Battle of Jakku and awesome characters like Ray Sloane and Gallius Rex, this trilogy is now known more for its interludes, most notably the introduction of Cobb Vanth. The next biggest series of books in this era are the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, which focuses on the titular squadron hunting down the elite Imperials of the Shadow Wing Squadron. Though I have not read the trilogy, I've heard some amazing things about the last 2 books, and Liam and I look forward to reading and reviewing the books soon. There are plenty of standalone novels, but the best of the batch is by far Claudia Gray's Bloodline, which deals with the First Order's initial forays into the galaxy and the reveal of Leia's parentage during a politically gridlocked era. I can't speak enough praises for this book, which may be the very best in canon and an all-time Star Wars novel. What's ultimately fascinating about the books of this era is the fact that two of the most important and exciting novels have not even been released yet: Shadows of the Sith and The Princess and the Scoundrel. The former has been described as the essential novel between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and the latter as a honeymoon trip gone wrong. These are two of the most exciting stories of this era, and we currently don't know what's really in them, which speaks to both the potential and the lack of highly demanded Star Wars books in this era. Of course, there are games like the well-made Star Wars Squadrons and Battlefront 2 Story Mode, as well as the long-forgotten Star Wars Uprising. But this era is really known for one main thing: the Mandoverse. Enough cannot be said on how surprising and how awesome The Mandalorian has been, and the connections to Aftermath, Clone Wars, and Rebels has only elevated the show. Season 3 looks like it may be a huge galaxy-shaping season, but for now, the story has thrived on the combination of the coolness of Din Djarin and the adorableness of Grogu, while on their series of smaller-scale misadventures. The fact that we have live-action Star Wars on the small screen be this successful already is exciting, but there are still areas of growth necessary. While the shows of this era are meant to culminate in a climactic story event that many speculate could be a canonized heir to the Empire, the massive success of The Mandalorian didn't translate all too well to the Book of Boba Fett. Memed as Mando 2.5 before the release, the show ended up only really having Boba's story be caught up to The Mandalorian and some of the power consolidation on Tatooine, while also giving away 2 whole episodes to the greater narrative of the era. While exciting to watch, the show should have focused on the titular character and saved Din and Grogu's reunion until the 3rd season of The Mandalorian. Hopefully, Star Wars Ahsoka and whatever else comes out in this era is more Mandalorian than Boba Fett. And Boba Fett as a character hopefully gets more development before this hopefully amazing climactic event. There's a lot of iconic moments from these shows, like Luke's entrance, Ahsoka's duel, and Boba on the Rancor, but there is certainly room to grow if the Mandoverse is meant to fill out the lore of the early New Republic era. Therefore, I give this era a...
The Force will be with you. Always.
Now, to the final era.
The Force will be with you. Always.
The sequel trilogy is the biggest piece of content to come out in the Disney Star Wars era, and it is the sole reason why we talk of Star Wars to this level today. With it, a third trilogy that had been rumored for decades came into existence, and Star Wars returned to the top position in popular culture alongside Marvel's MCU, which many consider the blockbuster franchise successor to Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. While it may be the biggest part of Disney Star Wars, the sequel trilogy is ultimately 3 good to great films that have only bare bones cohesion between their 3 parts. Just like people complained, criticized, and lambasted the prequel trilogy 2 decades ago, these films have faced the same sort of negative attention, further heightened by social media and political effects. There is certainly someone who loves The Force Awakens but hates The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, someone who hates The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker but loves The Last Jedi, someone who only loves Palpatine and The Rise of Skywalker and nothing else, and even those who hate these films so much that they are trying to figure out ways to remove them from canon. I'm not here to argue how good or bad these films are, but I can say that I personally rank them The Last Jedi first, The Rise of Skywalker second, and The Force Awakens third. That may or may not change in the future, but I can say that there are some obvious issues that affect all of them. J.J. Abrams gives little understanding for the galactic political situation after 30 years, instead opting to create a new Rebellion versus Empire storyline. Rian Johnson's decision to start The Last Jedi immediately after The Force Awakens nullifies any chance for explanation and growth between the movies, leaving the story to carry all the changes in the characters and situations when a slight gap could have made the transition for both much more digestible. Finally, throwing Palpatine and changing Rey's origin in a final film that needed at minimum a 3-hour runtime ensures that only the quest fetch is the priority for the story. I still love all 3 films, but they will need to depend on the New Republic era shows and the content filling out all of the missing lore. as well as a show like The Clone Wars in the 1 year gap between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. Currently, the only real content outside of the films is Star Wars Resistance, an animated show about racers who get caught up with the First Order's machinations and are on the run, a la Battlestar Galactica. But it's considered the lowest tier of animated Star Wars shows. Comics like Star Wars Allegiance do very little to fill out the 1 year gap, and even the most important novel in this time period, Resistance Reborn, has only ever had lukewarm to good reception to it. Galaxy's Edge and now the Galactic Star Cruiser are the biggest parts of the sequel era post movies, easily price out a lot of people and add little to the era in terms of storytelling. It's a shame because this era could truly evolve into something more. There are rumors of the sequel trilogy's big three coming together for a Disney Plus show, and Rogue Squadron is hinted as being a film set in a new future era of Star Wars. But we won't know for a while what else the sequel era will produce, it seems. Maybe that changes at Star Wars Celebration Anaheim 2022, but for now, I have to give this era a...
The Force will be with you. Always.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the second and final part on my ratings for the Star Wars eras under Disney. Let me know if you agree or disagree with what I have to say. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching the Star Wars Lads Weekly Special. If you enjoyed it, let us know by liking and commenting on the video below. If you enjoy our channel, click subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we drop a new video. We have 2 videos a week now, and YouTube Shorts the other 5 days. We're also planning to release a skit very soon on both our YouTube and our TikTok. If you're a podcast fan, you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, as well as other platforms. You can also find us on our website, podpage.com/StarWarsLads. Lastly, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thanks again.